Story about a vase. It's really ugly vase in some ways, I think. But over the years, it's been, it's like an heirloom, I guess, because I received it from my mother, and she received it from her grandmother, Mary Magdalene, and she had received it from her, be my great grandfather, Antonio Dominic Cora. He came here from Italy. And before he left on the trip, his parents, mother especially, wanted to give him something that he would remember them by, because as far as I know, he never got to see them ever again. He was 17 when he got on a boat and came to America. And his father and mother was Giuseppe and Domenica. And they had received the vase Domenica had from her parents, and I don't know their first names, but her maiden name was Castanero, and she had received it from them, and may have been in the family for a long time, but it was precious to them, and they wanted to go on. And so what will happen is this vase, come some point in time, I'll give it to Sam, my daughter Samantha, and then some point she'll give it to Sophia, and Sophia will give it to her child when it comes along, and pass down. That's like 9 generations. That's pretty cool, don't you think? Yeah, so I was talking about just passing something on generation to generation, and this is something in my family, and maybe there's something in your family like it, and it's it becomes important when we're able to pass something on. Yeah, I made that story up. That's not a true story. That's not a true story. But I really wanted to get your attention. And now that I have it, I want to talk to you about generations. Because you see, some of you, and by the way, you heard me say, I think it's an ugly vase. I bought it yesterday at the store, and I thought it would break, and it didn't. Because now I got to do something with this vase. I'll give it to somebody so you'll have a story passed on for generations into your life. But here's the thing. Sometimes we get something ugly that's passed on to us that we'd rather not have. I don't want a vase. Anybody with me? Sometimes things get passed on in our life from generations back that are lies and deception and ugliness and stuff that we would never want. I got good news for you. You can be a change agent and seeing that stop today in your life. And then I also want you to understand there's some things that are so beautiful and so precious, we don't want to fail to pass them on to the next generation. President Reagan, when I was a kid, he said this. He said that freedom, we could lose freedom in one generation. And I like to think about it this way. The church could lose a whole generation in one generation if we don't pass on this great thing that we've received from the Lord. Anybody with me? So it's important that we understand this, and I'll give you this phrase. It'll be the title for today. But generational transfer. Say it with me. Generational transfer. It's the idea that there's something that's been given to you that's important to pass on, and there's some stuff that you got to make a decision. It's going to end. It's not going to gain its way in my life, let alone anybody that's coming after me. So Romans 5, I'll pick it up in verse 12. It says this, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. And there's a bunch of verses in between, but I want to go down to 18, and you can read those this week, the other verses there. But in verse 18, it says, therefore, as through one man's offense judgment came to all men, resulting in condemnation, even so, somebody shout, even so, one man's righteous act, the free gift came to all men, resulting in justification of life. For as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, so also by one man's obedience many will be made righteous. The picture here is that all of us See, the Bible says this, none of us are righteous, no, not one. All have fallen short of the glory of God. We're all guilty of sin. And yet it was because of Adam, one man, that sin came into our world. In fact, for every generation that's existed since Adam, sin has been passed on from one generation to the next generation to the next, on and on. It's been transferred. The world understands this so much so that if you go to the doctor, and I've been to the doctor a few times recently, been to some doctors I'd never been to, and they do stuff online now, but used to they give you a form, but they ask you, so what'd your daddy have? And what'd your mama have? Did your family have any of these kind of diseases? Because they understand there's some things that are passed on from generation to generation. You with me? I love what my friend Dr. Nick says. He says this. He says that DNA is the gun, but your lifestyle is a trigger. Somebody needs to write that down because that may help you, right? DNA is the gun, but your lifestyle is a trigger. So they want to know what's been in your family. They understand there's a bloodline that's passing these things on. The other thing is, anybody been on Ancestry.com? Yeah. First service is like me and one other person, I think. They're afraid to admit it. I don't know. They found out something they don't want anybody to know. Because you might. What they do, they got this part of this now. I won't get into my DNA because I'm like a mutt. I got all kinds of everywhere, almost every continent. But I would say this, that one of the things they do on there is they have traits that your DNA may have. And it's, I don't know, it's interesting. I read that one. Yeah, that's kind of like that. I looked at him one day. It's been a couple years ago. The one, I wouldn't put too much stock in it, though, because one of them said that like it's the bald gene versus the having hair gene, and I got the having hair gene. So don't put too much stock in what they're saying. But they know there's certain things that are passed on. In fact, King Charles just visited America, and some people got all excited about it. Some people maybe didn't notice it. But he is king simply because of his bloodline. Because it's been a generation after generation of royalty. And I don't know if he's a good leader. I don't even know if he leads anything. He might. I don't know. I don't know if he's a fearful warrior, if he can command armies, if he can do any of those things. But one of the things I do know is because he's in that bloodline, he's royalty. Simply because generation after generation after generation, it's been passed on. In America, we don't have kings like that, but we do have football players. And there's a guy named Archie Manning, and he had a son named Cooper, another son named Peyton, another son named Eli. And we know Peyton, right? Yeah, they got a statue up to him downtown. We know Peyton. And probably many of you know Eli, incredible football players. And Cooper, who, because of physical health, wasn't able to continue to play, he had a son named Archie, who now is a college football player. And because college football players can make money, I think he makes more money than any other college athlete. And when I say more money, I think millions of dollars. And there's something in the DNA that people are thinking that gives them that ability, that arm, or gives them the ability to have skill to do that. That's been passed on from generation to generation to generation. Things get passed on. Things get transferred. And this morning I want to go to Genesis chapter 3 and just tackle this Adam that we read about. And people ask me before, Pastor, you think this is literal? You think it's allegoric? You think it's figurative? I'm like, I think it's literal. And when I get to heaven, if God says, well, I was just symbolic, I was just trying to give you some message, I say, oh, okay. I took it just like what you said. I don't think it's going to happen that way, but you understand what I'm saying. Genesis chapter 3, pick it up in verse 1. It says, now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Now, if you got a highlighter, pen, or whatever, you might circle, nor shall you touch it, because God didn't say that to Adam, but it seems like Adam's maybe putting up a fence, so his wife will never go and even touch it and be tempted to eat it, sounds like. Verse 4. Then the serpent said to the woman, God's a liar. It doesn't say that there, but here's what he says. You will not surely die. He contradicts what God says. Verse 5, for God knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit, ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. It's one of those stories that is famous. Some of the Bible stories, people know them even if they haven't read the Bible. Anybody with me? You know somebody, they know, they could tell you about the story. Most Americans know something about the birth of Christ. They might get it wrong, but they know something about it. Some would know the story of Moses at some level, and a lot of people know the story of Adam and Eve. Again, maybe not every detail, but they know Adam and Eve caused some stuff. And by the way, I know it's Mother's Day. And my wife usually speaks on Mother's Day, but I'm speaking today. I'm a little taller than her, and so I'm not what you expected. And by the way, I know I just mentioned Eve. Some of you ladies may be a little apprehensive. Pastor Tony going to go after the women making bad decisions. Not at all. I'm going to go after everybody. It's okay. I'm coming after you. Yeah. So this can help us all. This can help us all. I want to help you. I hope you hear my heart in this. I want to help you. But here's the first thing I see that's important. There's this serpent, and you got to remove this idea that the serpent is a snake prior to the curse. You know, any movie I've ever seen about depicting this scene, they show a boa constrictor in a tree talking evil. That's not what that was. The serpent was a little different, because the curse was he's going to be on the ground, crawling on his belly, eating the dust. It's going to be low. So if that's the curse, then no doubt you were in a different status and posture and position before. So I think the serpent was probably upright. In my opinion, I'm not trying to start a cult or anything, but I don't think he's what we imagine the serpent to be today, because we see the cursed picture of that. The serpent was upright, and he had the ability to communicate with humans. Whatever you believe about animals before, this creature had the ability to talk, and it wasn't strange, right? If a snake comes and talks to me today, I'm going to be like, whoa, wait a minute. I know the story anyways, okay? But that would be odd. But no, this creature, and it says this about more cunning than any beast of the field. There's not another animal that has the ability to draw in and do what it does. And it's different than a snake. So understand that Eve is listening. She's leaning in and listening to a creature that's giving her, I would say this, to a voice other than her husband, and one that contradicted God. And I would say this for the first point this morning, if you're taking notes, the voice that you listen to frames the decisions you make for your life right now and for generations to come. And the question is, what are you listening to? What's coming into here and leaving deposits in your thinking? Because I'll be honest with you, there's some books I can't read. There's some music I can't listen to. Some TV programs I can't watch. There's even some people I can't entertain the conversation that they have because of the negativity and just the ugliness that they are, and sometimes even things that are saying to twist what I need to believe as truth. I said in front of college professors that I had to, okay, I got to get a grade in this class, but I'm going to doodle on my paper while he's talking about this stuff that is not true. And there's something to be said for the idea of listening. We're all listening to somebody. What does that listening do to impact my life? Is it good? Is it bad? I remember when I was a kid, I was fourth grade. I had a paper out. Let me help you know what a paper out is. There used to be these things that we had that, there was no social media. There was no 24-hour news cycle. In the morning or evening or both, they would deliver a paper with all that stuff in it. Now, it already happened, but you didn't know what happened because you didn't have any other way to find out. So you'd read it and find out. So I had one. It was early in the morning, like 5 in the morning. I think you had to be delivered by 6 or something like that. And I walked the 2 streets in our neighborhood, just a few houses, and I'd take the paper up and drop them off. And builds character when you're a little kid and they make you work or something, And then I had to go back and collect the money. This is a whole other story. I'm on a tangent right now, but this thing I feel I need to tell. I had to go back and knock on the door in the middle of the day on like Saturday and say, hey, I can come here to collect the money for the paper. We don't know that much. I'm like 10-year-old. Well, I think you do. So, again, I'm in the neighborhood one morning. It's early. And there's this big dog. It's coming toward me. It's huge. Its name may have been Fido, but its middle name was Killer. And it was coming my way. And I was scared, and I didn't know what to do. And there was a yard right here. Had a fence around it. And had a gate, I believe. I went in the yard and knocked on the door. He said, well, that's not a big deal. It's early in the morning. It's a big deal because there was this girl, I don't know how she was, but she would walk along the fence every day. And she'd turn around and she'd walk back and walk to the other side and walk back. And I don't know what her challenges was in life. She may have been 21. She may have been older than that. Remember, she had long, dark hair, and she'd walk back and forth, had a dress on every day, unless it was raining. You see her out there walking by. And there's all kinds of stories. 10-year-old boys have all kinds of stories. And they told about, you got to be careful around the house because they'll grab you and they'll take you inside, and they do stuff to they kill little kids, or Hansel and Gretel. I can't remember the whole stories, but it caused you to think. If I was walking down the road, I'd walk on the other side. And they didn't even take the paper. But I was out there that morning trying to get them all delivered. Here comes this dog. And I ran in their yard. And I don't know if it was too close to me. I can't remember. But the gate didn't shut. And here it comes. And I pounded on the door. And this man, big, huge guy. When you're 10 years old, everybody's huge. He opened the door. And he said, looked at me. I go, there's a dog. That's what I said. And he steps out. And he goes, get out, like that. And then I didn't know if he's going to kill me or not. I said, thank you. He shut the door and went back inside. And what I realized in that moment was that everything I've been told was just a bunch of lies. That all the stuff that had been said and all the stories that had been conjured up were all just lies, and I believed them. I believed him to the point that emotions were running high and fear was there and all the things simply because of something I believed, or the voices I was listening to. The Bible says in 1 Timothy 2:14 that Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell in transgression. Adam, it seems as though he was willfully committing sin. Psalms 55, verse 3 says, because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they bring down trouble upon me, and in wrath they hate me. It's understanding that there is a voice I can listen to that is truth, that will lead me in the best direction for my life. And there's other voices that try to pollute that. John chapter 10 says this, that my sheep, Jesus says, they hear my voice, they know my voice, and another they'll not follow. And so how do we navigate that? Well, first of all, I've got to do what James 4:7 says, resist the devil, right? Therefore, submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. When I recognize and understand there's voices that are in contradiction with this, then I got to go to a place to say, I want to move that out of my life. And it's a resisting. Everybody say resist. You see, resist doesn't mean that the serpent starts talking, I listen more. Resist says, I'm going to submit to God, so I'm going to move away from this situation. 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5 said we demolish, in the NIV, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. I've got to make the decision in my life of the voices I'm going to hear and the lies that I could believe and replace them with truth. You see, if I don't do that in my life, then the generations that follow, they'll experience the lies that I believed. And I got to replace those lies with truth, because lies persist throughout generations. But today, they can end with you. And the other thing I notice in this passage that I think is important for us to grab is that seemingly Adam is right there with her. And she gives him the fruit to eat because he was with her. But Adam did nothing. He could have stopped the whole thing. He could have said, hey, wait a minute, you joker, quit talking to my wife. He could have got in between. You're lying. We don't believe this. But yet he just stood there, passive. See, passivity with your life's purpose will impact your life right now and the generations that follow you. You see, by the way, I'll just say this. There's nobody in your life and your family tree that you look back and say, hey, I really thankful for my great-great-grandfather, or thankful for Uncle Ned, or what. He did absolutely nothing. He was just passive. He didn't make anything happen. The people that you know in your family tree, they did something. Good or bad, they did something. Right? Some of you say, Pastor, if you knew my family tree, I got all this stuff that's wrong. Hey, join the crowd. If you dig far enough, you uncover enough closets, you'll find something in all of our family trees, right? Acts 13:36, it says this about David, that David, after he had served his generation by the will of God, his own generation, then he fell asleep and was buried with his fathers. David was active in serving his generation. There's a purpose for your life right now. And for the generations that will be impacted by your life, it's important that you don't set in neutral, because many times believers, one of the great sins of believers is they get in neutral, setting there. They're hearing a lot of good stuff. Fuel's coming. They're revving the engine, but they're not going anywhere. There's a difference when you're in neutral and when you're in drive. When you shift that stick shift, you press that clutch and you push it into first gear, all of a sudden there's movement. When it was just in between the gears, it's not doing anything. You got to do what you're created to do. God has created you for good works. You're here on this planet. You got to do those. And no one that's impacted their generation did nothing. And I know some people say, but Pastor Tony, I'm in a waiting process. And I'm like, oh, it's cool. How are you waiting? Are you just kind of... I'm not talking about rest. I'm not talking about Sabbath or anything. I'm talking about, are you just, well, whatever happens, happens. Passive. See, in Isaiah 40:31, where it talks about they that wait upon the Lord, that wait is not okay, I'm doing nothing. It's like a runner. He's got his foot on the starting block, and he's waiting to hear the gunfire, because when he hears it, he's going to launch into the race. He's waiting to hear the signal to go. Not to be passive. No runner ever won a race being passive. I seen a little bit of a replay of the Kentucky Derby, and it showed that horse, something Tempo, Golden Tempo maybe. I don't follow it, but I happened to see it. And it was way in the back. And all of a sudden, they show the trajectory coming around there. I'm like, I don't even watch this, but I'm like, yeah, go. Because we like to root for the underdog. The guy in the back of the pack, go, go, go. You know why? Because that horse in the front and that rider may have been a little passive, but somebody way in the back said, I'm not giving up. I'm going to push through. And you have to push through for your generation. Right? Your generation now, your own generation, and the generations to come. Right? As Psalm 145 verse 4 said, one generation shall commend your works to another, and they shall declare your mighty acts. You got to be active in the process of seeing the people that are coming after you experience God. Now, the last thing that I'm going to point out that I see in this narrative here that's important for us today is this, that it says this in the Word, that when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took the fruit and ate it. Everybody say, she took the fruit and ate it. And then it says this, she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. It didn't just land on her and that was it. Her eyes are now open. She wants his eyes to be open. She gives him the fruit, and he eats it. So they did that, right? She saw it. It's pleasant to look upon, desirable. And now she's eyes are open, and she gives it to her husband with her. And then everything in their life became so good. No. They had eaten what God had forbidden. And I would just say that appetite that was developed, we're all still impacted by the product of that. Appetites developed for something God forbids will ultimately corrupt your life and your bloodline. And it's so easy for us in the world we are in because there's so many shiny things, so many attractive things, appealing things to our flesh. We like to have that. We like to have this. And how many know there's nothing wrong with having things? Sometimes things get us. And for that moment right there, the thing that God had told them no, and the enemy had contradicted, they had now eaten, and now there's an appetite. That appetite's so strong, by the time you get to Genesis 6:12, 10 generations later, that right before the flood, it said that all flesh, everybody say all flesh on the earth had been corrupted. It says this, that the imagination of men's hearts was evil, only evil continually. There's a reason why there was a flood. Because of Adam's decision to eat what God said no to, that there's an appetite that was developed, and now that was like the floodgates are open, and everybody now is desiring a fleshly diet rather than a diet on the Spirit. And by the way, it's important to understand, if a stray cat shows up at your house today and you feed it, now you got a cat. If you feed the stray cat's going to come back. It's not even coming back because it likes you. It doesn't even care about you except you're giving it food. I'm not anti-cat too much. But I would just say this. If you feed the stray cat, it'll come back. If you feed the flesh, you know what it's going to do? It's going to grow, and it's going to want more and more and more. So like Galatians 5, it outlines the works of the flesh, and they don't lead to a good place. And then it says, but wait a minute, Galatians 5, there's this thing that is the fruit of the Holy Spirit that can be produced in our life. And when you get to that place and you feed the spirit man that's within you, he's going to grow, and your appetites are going to change. Jot this down. Law of the harvest. Galatians 6, 4 verses. The word says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever man sows, that will he also reap. Whatever we plant, that's what we're going to harvest. For he who sows to the flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And let us not grow weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we do not faint, if we don't lose heart. Therefore, as we have an opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the oikos of faith, household of faith. That if you sow to the Spirit, you're going to experience spiritual growth, spiritual development, spiritual maturity. But if I sow to the flesh, all I'm going to get is the return that it gives. And by the way, I've sat on the side of the desk every time I've heard people talk to me about appetites of what God forbids. I've heard them tell me story after story of how their life is now just wreckage and carnage of the decisions they made. I don't need to have another meeting about it. I don't want to see anybody fall into that ever again. I don't need to do another funeral for someone who's had an appetite for something they couldn't suppress and they open themselves up to things. I'm just saying this, that if we're not on it, we'll mess our own life up and the generations that follow. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this: you sow a thought, you reap an action. You sow an action, you reap a habit. You sow a habit, you reap addiction. You sow addiction, you can reap, if you sow character, then you'll reap destiny. That I have an opportunity to choose what I'm going to sow in my life. And when I do, right, the appetites that I have get fed because they're spiritual. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 45 through 49. And so is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, Jesus Christ, became a life-giving spirit. However, the spiritual is not first, but the natural, and afterward the spiritual. The first man was of the earth, made of dust. The second man is the Lord from heaven. As the man of dust, as was the man of dust, so also are those who are made of dust. And as is the heavenly man, so are also those who are heavenly. And as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we shall bear also the image of the heavenly man. You have an opportunity, because of Jesus, to change what people see in you and in the generations that follow. There's a book, 1900, copyright 1900. I say that because the way it presents things is a little different than we would today. It's called A Study in Education and Heredity by E. Winship. And in it he outlines a story of two families. First family is that of Jonathan Edwards. He starts out with his father, who was a pastor, and Jonathan Edwards' mother was the daughter of a pastor. Now, you may not know who Jonathan Edwards is. You might have explained a little bit. Jonathan Edwards preached probably the most famous sermon in all of American history, 1741 in Connecticut. He preached for a crowd of people, sinners in the hands of an angry God. And it was just a manuscript. It was all written out. He read it, word for word. And as he read it, people began to stand up in the crowd crying, saying, God, forgive me, repenting of their life. It was so powerful that it set ablaze revival in our nation. Well, in this book, he outlines Jonathan Edwards' family. And it says this, that Edwards' family includes 14 college presidents, more than 100 university professors, 100 plus lawyers, 30 judges, 60 physicians, over 100 pastors, missionaries, and theology professors, and some 60 authors. In 1900, the author writes this, that throughout history, there has scarcely been a great American industry that hasn't featured an Edwards family member among its chief promoters. Pretty wild, isn't it? That I don't know what Jonathan Edwards' family tree was before he got to him, but I know this: he made a decision that those that follow me are going to be impacted by my life. And we can read of the impact that was made. And then it contrasts, again, not necessarily language, and we probably wouldn't write a book like this today, But contrast it with a second family. Family number 2, members of the infamous Jukes family. Hope nobody's name's Jukes in here, but if it is, God can change it all. Yeah, infamous Jukes family couldn't be made. They couldn't be made to study, wouldn't work, and are reputed to have cost the state of New York millions of dollars. Their entire record is one of pauperism. That word is not a word we necessarily use today, but it would mean they were dependent on aid and support outside of themselves. So it is one of pauperism, crime, and insanity. From among their descendants, 310 were professional paupers, 440 were physically wrecked by their own wickedness, 60 were habitual thieves, 133 were convicted criminals, and 55 were victims of impurity. Only 20 actually learned a trade, 10 of those learned it in prison, and this notorious family produced 7 murderers. A huge contrast between the two is what I wanted you to see. And I hope somebody, that was 1900, hope somebody stood up and said, I choose Jesus, and dropped off the chains of bondage and the ugliness that had been passed on, said, I want a new life, and their descendants have been different. You see, it lands with you this morning. Talking to parents, grandparents, maybe an aunt or uncle, maybe you don't have kids, but you work with kids, or you're a coach, or you're a teacher. This series is Generation Power, what we pass on. What are you going to pass on? What needs to end with you, and what needs to be supported and bolstered from you to continue? It's weighing out how am I going to impact the generations that follow.